Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have over 117 people that are signed up, so I was surprised to see so many people want to talk about governance, but this is proof to us that this is an important topic. My name is Dr. Corbett. I'm with the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego, and we've been doing this work for a number of years, really focusing on getting information in the hands of people and thinking about it from a leadership perspective. So today's focus will be on leadership and how can specifically board chairs and other board members take this information and implement it in their work. We believe that governance will turn this trajectory that we are on and turn things around. So today is going to be a pretty enlightening day. You'll have a lot of information, and the good thing is we're going to share information with you afterwards. All right. Thank you all for putting your stuff in the chat here. Jay or Sarah, since you're at the top of my screen, give me a thumbs up if you can see my regular view versus my presenter view. All right, thank you very much. My dual screens like to play with me. All right, so let's. So today is really going to be focused on this, the 3 essential skills for board chairs. But some of it is going to be very applicable for pretty much all different positions and different types here. I'll have a lot of questions for you. But before we get started, there's one question I want to ask you all. What do you have to do to dedicate your time to this next hour? What do you think you need to do to dedicate your time to this next hour? I tell my students that I get paid to be more interesting than your Facebook feed, right? So what is it that you have to be? Be present, very nice. Lock the children up in the next room, very nice. What else do you got there? Listen, yeah. Anybody else? Get my kid to leave the house and go to school. Yes. All right. So just try and give it to us, right? We want to take this hour. You signed up. You're here. Let's see how you can do it. Some people say I got to turn my cell off. Some people say I have to.
That's a good idea.
Put my cell phone in the other room. So there's a number of different things that you can do. That sounded like Scott saying that's a good idea. But try and figure out what do you need to do. Turn off your feed so that it's not popping up these messages. They're important, but we're just going to give ourselves a little time here. Just so all of you know, as many of you know, the Nonprofit Institute is 3 things that we focus on here. It's at the University of San Diego: leadership and professional education, community building and engaging philanthropy being the second one, working with and providing data to people, and then research and innovation. Those are our 3 buckets that we work within. Governance falls under leadership and how we tie that together, but we always put governance and philanthropy together because there's such a direct tie in there. Okay, so I mentioned that we have a governance symposium that's going to be coming up here shortly. So January 27th, 2022 is when the next governance symposium is. It's already out there. Early bird special ends in about 15 days. So if you're interested in getting an early bird special, please go ahead and register for the governance symposium. We already have people registered. We have some exciting speakers lined up also. Because of it being another unfortunate virtual conference, we have the opportunity to bring some really good speakers across the country around, and we don't have to pay for their flight. So that's great. So we'll have an opportunity to spend for those of you who know Board Source, I'll be sharing some of their data. The president of Board Source, who was just featured in the Harvard Business Review, she'll be one of our speakers as well. So we're gonna have some good people there. Board Chair Learning Group, we'll hear a little bit more about that later. But we, with the help of the Avila Foundation, now are starting our 2nd cohort for the Board Chair Learning Group. This is a learning group for board chairs because it's often at times what we say is the loneliest position in the nonprofit sector, right? It's hard to kind of talk to people. So what we do is we put them to groups together. So those are, that's just one way. And then the last one is we've been certifying board members for quite some time now. We believe that part of this leadership that's going to be required is going to be required for people who have some knowledge in the work. So in order to do that, we've been working with United Way to certify board members, and we've had over 50 people that have participated in that program over the last 2 years. It's comprised of 6 to 8 sessions. It's been online primarily, and it's been pretty powerful. As far as the conference agenda for the event, thank you for asking that question. Do we have any conference agenda information? No. It's a Surprise. No, we do have some stuff on our website right now as far as the format. If you go and then you click on our Eventbrite, you'll be able to kind of like look at that information. It'll give you some stuff. But the focus is on envisioning the future of governance. What is it gonna look like? What is the future gonna look like? So today I'll speak to you more on the 3 essential skills for board chairs. We say board chairs, soon to be board chairs, and sometimes they're committee chairs, right? For some of our stuff, it's board chairs or soon to be board chairs, right? So if you're a vice chair and you know it's coming, we include you because you'll need to have these skills also. You all will receive 2 things at the conclusion of this meeting. The first thing you're going to receive is all of my slides. The second thing that you're going to receive is we put together this kind of like a folder of all information we think board chairs could use to benefit and to be chairs. So we're going to give you a link to that, right? It's all this stuff that we just have, and it's good. It's like we decided to clean out our closet, right, and just throw everything in there for you. So you'll get a link for that one also. And then I like showing this, and you'll be able to see this. Is like I consider myself again a governance. Governance guru, right? And then, so this is the places I go to if I want to know information, right? Of course, you put anything in Google, you'll find whatever you're looking for, right? It doesn't mean it's right or accurate. I give this as an opportunity. So Minnesota Nonprofit Council, some of these are research groups also. Some of them have presentations around the country. Third sector, international sector, third research. Right before the pandemic, they had their last conference in Amsterdam. So as you could imagine, I pulled everybody and I was there, right? It is Amsterdam, right? So, but what they do is they once in a while, they have it every year, different parts of the world. And same thing with Arnova, they travel and they have some really good research. And it's for practitioners also, but it's just for board members and people who want to learn a little bit more. The way that I'm going to structure this is today, I'm going to start with giving you some data and some background, and then really talk about what these 3 principles are. When I found out that you all were going to be here today, I said, you know what, I'm going to dig deep into my governance stuff because I thought it was just going to be 5 of us, right? So I thought we were just going to sit around and talk. Somebody said 100, then I had to go back to bring out the big guns. So some of the things I use often is this book called the Nonprofit Answer Book, right? The Nonprofit Answer Book. It provides answers to a lot of the questions, right? And every now and then, if somebody asks me a question I don't know, I just turn my video off and I go to this book. All right, so the next one here is the Handbook of Nonprofit Governance. And I like this book called Boards That Lead, right? We'll have all those resources for you available. We have Kevin, who's been working in our in the Nonprofit Institute for quite some now, really strong. He works, he's from the Crop Center, and then we have Cynthia. So a lot of the emails will be coming from them. John Meyer, incoming chair. John, I'm hoping that after this, you stay here, right? So I don't want you to say no more nonprofit sector stuff, okay? So let's just talk about, we've all been through something, right? We've been through something. If you haven't heard, there's something that has been driving us. It's a little thing called the pandemic. And what it has done is it's driven the way that we do and receive money to be in a very different way. How do we receive money? What do we do, et cetera? So I thought it was important just to kind of show you this. Now, just to give you some context, this is from the state of the nonprofit sector. Dr. Laura Dietrich and her team every year put together, what is the revenue? How do nonprofits fare so well? What are the nonprofit leaders saying? If you go to our website, and Kevin will put this for them also, it's a recent report for this year. It just was released a month and a half ago. So I want you all to kind of like just give an idea of where we are right now. So first question I'm going to have for you, I'm a professor, I'm going to ask you some questions and hopefully assign you some homework. So the nonprofit revenues in San Diego, as of now, most of it is going to come from contributions, right? Roughly about almost half of it in contributions, right? Whereas, and then program revenue, it comes in a second, investments, third, and then the last one is revenue. If you look at California as a whole, you'll notice that their program revenue is a lot higher. And then if you look across the United States, that's higher also. So what do you think that says about San Diego? Well, what do you think what is it telling you, right? I don't ever say this is exactly it, but it gives us some information. It tells us something. So if you want to unmute yourself, I'll try that first to see how it goes. But unmute yourself and tell us? What do you think this is giving us an indication of?
San Diegans are generous.
That's
Or
true.
they're high dollar donors.
That's true also. Anyone else?
I think it shows that in the California numbers that nonprofits see that they need to rely more on earned income than on donated income.
Yeah, right. So that's good. Who was that? I didn't see who that was. Who's speaking? Mind?
That was Bob Lehman from San Diego Museum Council.
Bob, very nice to see you. Thank you. Right. So what happens is that I kind of also see that there could be opportunity here, right? Are we over reliant on these big donors, right? Or if everybody else is doing something with earned revenue and other aspects of it, maybe there's something there. Luis, were you going to say something?
Yes, to give this chart context, it would be helpful to know what the per capita, for example, if at 40, 46, 48, et cetera, our nonprofits were getting more money on average than California's scenario, that would help to see, whether or not, as one of the members said, is it the big donors that are elevating these numbers? So having a little more context would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, so if you dig, the report gives you a little bit more information, and then we can get some more data for you. I pulled some sections out of the report just to kind of give you an overview of some of this, but definitely more context definitely all helps. One graph does not tell the whole story, but it does just give you an idea of where we are, but also if there's opportunity there, and if things continue or not, and take a look at them. When we talk to the looking ahead, what some people are saying, this data is from people like yourselves, right? They're nonprofit leaders who respond to our questionnaires. You often at times see a survey from us. These are coming from people like yourself, right? So most people believe that this coming year is going to be somewhat better, where 37% thinks it's going to be about the same as this year. The real question is that, of course, what is coming? And how do we know what's coming around the corner? Of course, we can't see what's around the corner, but there are a bunch of people who depend on us to know what's around the corner, right? So this is, in general, when we talk to nonprofit leaders, this is what they think. And a lot of people see a positive outlook here, right? They think it's going to be at least at a minimum the same, but or better, or even more, 10% believe even higher. Okay, higher information. Again, just giving you a context of where people see us. As you all know, diversity, equity, and inclusion across the country, particularly because of boards, have been pretty strong in focusing on this diversity, equity, and inclusion. 76% of the San Diego individuals who responded said that they implemented practices to increase diversity of board members. That's at 76%. Others have increased diversity of job candidates, more of a focused approach to that. Many have issued a public statement where their organization is committed to anti-racism, and then some have done specialized training for their staff and their boards. So that's just a sneak peek of that. Board Source does this and every year, and the reason I like highlighting Board Source information is for two things. One is that they actually are really good at asking board chairs specific questions. So it's board chairs they'll ask, and then they'll ask the CEOs, right? And then their number is roughly like about 1,000 people that they get across the country, right? So often at times when they talk about, just to give you a first example, do you feel you have the right people on the board for the following task, right? So 84% feel like they have the right people for financial oversight. They get it, they understand it, they feel like they have the right people for strategy. But if we look down here, influencing decision makers, right, advocacy and raising the funds needed for the organization, they feel like they could use a little bit more assistance in that arena. And then also for when they go out and look for board members, people often at times say, hey, we need some big money hitting people on our board, people who have money. But when you look at it over and over again, both of these groups say They'd rather make sure they have people who have more passion for the mission. If you go to the BoardSource website, easily accessible is this leading intent survey, and they've done it several years in a row. So you can look at that and see that. You can look at the representation, who they are, where they are also, right? Some of the data is skewed, right? But what I want you all to do is to look at this from a, hey, what is this data? What could this data be telling me from a higher level perspective, right? Often at times, board chairs have to get into the balcony and get off the dance floor. The dance floor, you're around to see everybody, you're to see what's going on. But if you get in the balcony, you're able to look down and see where people are congregating, see where the exits are, et cetera. And what I want you to do is that the data is data, and you can definitely dig into it. But there's a portion of our boards and board meetings that often at times, there are people that are digging so deep into it during the time that sometimes they're blinded by what else is going on, right? So I want you to look at this as that, but I'd love to go into it. And for those of you, every year in October, we have the whole day where we dedicate for people digging into this data, right? We look at it, we present it, and we just finished 3 webinars. They may be accessible to you on the data. And then also, like I mentioned, the BoardSource CEO is going to be here in January 27th, presenting at our event. So you'll be able to get a little bit more information. I'm sure she'll share some of this information also. When they did across the country, people are saying that for the importance of racial and ethnic diversity on boards, right? The importance of it, right? The blue here is telling us how important it is. Right, the boards that were all white boards, they said it's 20% important. Other respondents, they're talking about it's extremely important. And racial ethnic diversity within the boardroom, people are saying it's important. But what the data is telling us, even though people are saying that this data is important, that we often at times we are not seeing movement in that area. Right, we are still not seeing movement in that area, and we'll have to talk about why that is. I'll share a little bit about that. But, we'll figure out what harms. So all of them are saying, hey, 82 chief executives say it's important, right? 17 of the group, 70% of the group is saying they're dissatisfied with it. And then only 50% have aligned board recruitment practices with diversity goals, all right? And I would even say a less figure are those who are actually understand what it is, why is it important? Right. So today I'll kind of just give you at least a couple of things about that. 2 other data points I wanted to share. Again, I'm sorry if I'm putting you to sleep, but you can get some coffee and just get right back in the game. Right. So 2 things I want to show you that I think are important. Job satisfaction. Right. So they asked CEOs, chief executives, about their job satisfaction. 45% of this large number said that they were extremely satisfied. All right. Now, moderately satisfied, 40%. Some people would say, okay, if I looked at that, I said 45, I get 85% are satisfied in some way, right? Is 85%, good enough, neither satisfied or dissatisfied? What kind of impact does your board have on your level of personal job satisfaction, right? Extremely positive and moderately positive. So they feel like the way that their board engages, the way that their board partners with the CEO is important, right? Something that we know, but it's good to see some of the background data. And again, the data is going to answer a lot more questions for you. So they also asked, how do we know, how do we choose board chairs, right? How board chairs are chosen, right? Number 74, they look at people who are well respected by the rest of the board, 74%, right? Oddly enough, if you look a little bit further down here, the board chair perspectives, board chair was the only person willing to serve, almost 40%, right? Right? Does that surprise anybody? Right? And then is this the first time you have served as a board chair? 62% first time serving as a board chair. Right? So often at times, how do you know how to be board chair? By seeing what other people have done. Does that mean that was effective or not? Right? It's questions for you to kind of figure out. And then how much work do you have to do on your own in order to kind of continue to make that happen? Right? So, and then, we elected a chair who was well prepared, just a little over half of them. Right. So there's a saying that there's a need here, and the reason that there's so many people on here also is that there's a strong need. Sometimes you're just like, I guess it's my turn to be board chair, right? And that's often the time to resign from the board, right? So there's ways that you can kind of like look at this information there. So I'll cover the three main components of what that's going to look like, right? Just so you all know, these are the two factors. I mentioned board source a couple of times. This is the other resource that we go after, governance as leadership. It's essentially this process that allows us to look at different modes of governance, right? Generative, thinking about where information is and how do we have those conversations, strategic and fiduciary, right? My slide, you'll be able to see what they mean by that. We want people to operate in the generative space that allows that magic to happen and not focus just on strategic or fiduciary, right? And also not to think about what's in the past. I often at times hear boards that say, we spend so much time talking about what happened that by the time we want to talk about where we're going, it's too late, right? And when you talk about what has happened, often at times they're like, okay, can we hear from the governance committee? So the governance committee says, okay, we didn't meet this month. And then they go on for 15 minutes. If you didn't meet, what are you talking about, right? Like, what are you sharing to people? So try to figure out how do we realize that time is that. Those of you who are writing down quickly, you will have this. If you want to take a snap a picture of it, feel free to snap a picture of it. But you'll have all of this stuff. It's important for us to get this stuff into your hands. Just let me know when you're taking the picture so I can smile. Okay, know when to take. This is the three things that we're going to talk about, right? The three things. And I had to make sure you all were going to remember it, right? Like, so this is what I did. I said, what are the three things that we're really going to have to do? Board chairs need to know, and leaders know when to take charge, when to partner, and when to stay out of the way, right? When to take charge, when to partner, and when to stay out of the way. And I'm going to go through these so you can understand what I mean by them. But what I want you to do is to let this stuff sink in. And then when you're having some of these discussions, when you're talking to some people, you'll realize, hey, this might be my time to kind of like stay back a little bit and see what's kind of like going on also. The word governance comes from this term, Greek term, kubernetes. It means to steer, right? So think about this big ship. If we wanted to say, hey, we need to hurry up and go back home, something happened, how long is it going to take you to steer and turn this ship around, right? That's often like a governing board, right? It's a slow process often at times. The funny, us consultants, we make jokes. We say, if you've seen one board, you've seen one board, right? That all of the boards are so unique in their own right. Like, how do we make sure that we understand what their needs are, how they're going? So if you join one board, you can't expect it to be the same way. Okay, so let's talk about how you take charge. Remember, know when to take charge, know when to partner, and know when to stay out of the way. So let's talk about the first one, taking charge, questioning your old practices. There was this famous woman, military woman, who says the worst phrase in the English language is "it's always been done that way," right? How do we make sure that Susan Day, yes, I see it, right? So there's ways to allow people to kind of like understand that, right? Questions old practices. What is it? Why are we doing it that way? The number one way to renew a board is to add a new board member. Number one way to renew a board is to add a new board member. Right? That new person's going to say, why do you do it that way? And somebody's going to say, I don't know. We've always done it that way. Right? So allowing the refreshing, the energy to come in there, right? Establish a decision-making model. Who's to say just the yays and nays should be the decision-making model? Right? Some people are jockeying around, making sure they get the votes, right? So maybe the yays or nays should not be the only decision-making model. So I put this up here for you all, but it talks about, hey, what is another ways that people make decisions and what do they have to consider? Like, what environmental factors come into play? I'm sorry, this is really slow because it's from a book. Or organizational factors, decision factors. Don't get deep into it, but look at the categories here. Sometimes, even though it may not be the best, I'll say, let's do a SWOT analysis on it, right? What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Maybe we need to do a PEST on this. When I do my strategic planning with groups, I do a SWOT analysis and a PEST analysis. Political, economical, sociological, and technological. What data do we need to have? The other thing is, if we don't have the right people in the room, So let's get the right people in the room. Let's get the experts in the room. Are we only relying on the people in the room? My mom, my dad, my sister, who are all on the board with me? Are we only relying on these individuals? They think like me, right? So figuring out else do we need to get some of this data in the room. Keith and Steve, very nice to see you all. See you both participating. I see also many people who were part of our board chair learning group also here. Very nice to see you as well, our first class. I believe, and my biggest decision-making tool here is about my core values, right? So our organizations, I'm not going to talk about mission, vision, and core values, as you all know that they're important, but mission, vision, and core values are decision-making factors also. Does it align with our organization? I believe if organizations have core values and they live these core values, we can often at times say, does it align with our core values and who we are? I believe relationships thrive when we have alignment in core values. I think relationships fall apart when we don't have that alignment, right? So, Kevin, jump in if I'm missing some of the questions, because this is where I start to roll, right? So can you talk about all volunteer board when board members are not only steer, but also do the work of the organization? Definitely, right? I'll talk about that shortly. It's a very difficult part when you start, you're the volunteer, you're doing this work, and then now you have to pull back from that work. Extremely hard. I often tell people, spend the time now digging into that rather than allowing it to happen. Because when you spend the time doing it, it's not going to be, you're going to do it the right way. I tell people you can do it now and take the time, or you can spend the next 5 years trying to fix it, right? So sometimes getting the support you need or the help you need also, right? So trying to figure that out. One of the things that I like to make sure that you all are looking at, and I think it's important for board chairs, is understanding where your life cycle placement is. Many of you have seen me, potentially have seen me doing some of this work when I talk about it, is that some organizations are at the startup phase. Again, their needs are going to be different. Sometimes they're all volunteer boards, whereas other people are adolescent phase. And what we do very much like human development, we ask people, let's identify where your organization is, right? Human development is like a startup phase. We're an infant. You don't tell an infant to go to your room, right? You don't tell an adolescent, right? So different stages, you're going to have different needs. As we grow, our needs are going to change. What got us, the old adage, what got us here won't get us there, right? And if you don't do something when you up this stage to sustain, because everybody says, I want to sustain, I want to sustain. Well, if you don't do something to sustain, you're at risk of decline and dissolution. So figuring out where are we and how do we need to renew? My example is Apple iPhone. When people stop talking about Apple iPhone, what happens? When people stop talking about iPhone, they release the new iPhone, right? When they release a new iPhone. So then we also have here, so I go to boards and I tell boards and board chairs and everyone, hey, I want you to take a blue dot and tell me where you feel the organization is. Sorry, take a blue dot and tell me where you feel like your board members are, your board team is, and take a green dot and tell me where your organization is. Okay, the green dot is for the organization, the blue dot is for the team. Often this was done with a San Diego nonprofit during a board retreat, right? And people were saying that, hey, this organization is at risk of decline and we're all new, or we're all in the adolescence phase. What is this telling us? I just say it's a startup for a conversation. It's a way to have a conversation. For me, I believe that this might be a good mixture. If an organization is at risk of decline, right, and dissolution, it's up there and it needs to renew. What better group than a bunch of adolescent people coming together, because adolescents take risk. Adolescents have the energy often at times to put in for it. So maybe this is it. Now, some would say we still need to have somebody here, but it allows us to have a conversation. So what I say is, how do you get here? How do you do it? Get yourself some green dots, get yourself some blue dots, and start a conversation with your people. Right? Where are we? So now if we know we're at the adolescence phase, what are our needs that are going to help get us to the next level? If we are all volunteers, how do we work together or understand what's yet to come? If we know that we're going to be purchasing a building in the next year or two, who do we need to have on our board that might need to help us? What resources do we need to have? right? So that may making it well informed and having some of these conversations in a way to look at it. So insightful way to look at it. So I talked a little bit about that, but I want to make sure that we understand what we're talking about when we talk about this whole take charge thing here. Question old practices, establishing a decision-making model, be a creator of value, right? That's meaning that, like, how are you getting people in the room to have that value? How are you making sure your organization is having that value? Are you having discussions about that, right? In the surveys, they found out that just over 50% of CEOs are actually receiving annual evaluations. If we're trying to help people develop and help people take it to the next level, how are we not evaluating them as a group? How are we not setting them goals, right? And succession doesn't mean we're trying to get rid of you. It means that we're planning for the organization, right? So the board chair, how many, this is your role, board members in general, to say, isn't it that time of year for us to have an evaluation? Right? I've had to create some evaluations from organizations in our packet that we're giving you in that trough of information. We have a form created by McKinsey and Company specifically for nonprofits, an evaluation. So you can actually use some of the questions from there to help you as you create your own. Root out dysfunction and create a culture of inquiry, right? So a culture of inquiry is what? I believe you cannot go forward if you don't have a good culture that allows inquiry to come in and people can ask questions and feel it's okay to do that, right? You want different viewpoints, right? I was hiring somebody and somebody was like, oh, you're gonna hire that person, they're so different from us. They're gonna ask a lot of questions. And I said, exactly, right? Do you have the different viewpoints in the room? Are they able to do that, right? Open communication, information exchanges. They found that only a small portion of boards get their minutes and get their board notes a week in advance. Most of them get them 2 to 3 days in advance, and a lot of them get them that day, right? You want me to vote on something that's like 20 pages and you gave it to me an hour ago, right? So the goal and the average is to get it a week in advance. And if people are sometimes like a whole week, yes, a whole week. Right? If you want them to make decisions, allow them to do it. And if they're not looking at that, they're not making those decisions, that's when we hold people accountable, right? We'll talk about that in a little bit also. Tolerate ambiguity, consult outsiders, right? We can consult outsiders, give the University of San Diego a call, give each other a call, right? And figure that out. So the person who's interested in board valuation questions, it will be and is going to be in that prop that we give you. Right. It'll also say, and there's some really good questions in there that you're able to pull out. I think there's like 50, but you only pull out enough for the board too. I just did one for a group and it was at 15, 18 questions. You're really, again, a starting point to have a conversation. So that's the culture of inquiry that we want to look at also. And then we also say here, be mindful of the life cycle. Right? Establish and grow reserves. We had somebody, a nonprofit that we were working at in one of our programs, and she says, I have to prioritize our reserves. We have nothing. Within the year, 2 years ago, she had $75,000 in reserves. So you can make it happen. Figure out what happened. Those of you who have struggled because you've been using your reserves, that's what reserves are for. Right? It's not it's a rainy day fund when it's raining, right? Not when it's drizzling. Not when it's sprinkling. It's a rainy day fund, and we have gone through a rainy days. So figuring out how do we have those reserves? How are we growing those reserves? Believe it or not, many of the nonprofits telling us they fared okay with the PPP, with all the other actual stuff that's going on. They fared okay. Are we using those resources to replenish our reserves? Are we thinking about starting the reserves also, right? So let's see, I appreciate the same questions. Okay, everybody's going to get the questions. Okay. Yeah. And if you want them now, go to Google and look up McKinsey Nonprofit Board Assessment, McKinsey and Company. Okay. Live and breathe strategy and position. I'm writing a book called Hope is Not a Strategy, looking at evaluation and strategy. Strategy and position in the nonprofit sector. I believe you can come up with the best strategy. If you want your strategy to be more powerful, more successful, you have to leverage your position. right? How are you positioned in the community as your nonprofit? How are you positioned as your board, right? To figure out how are we able to do that information, right? And then the other thing is hold board members accountable. Sometimes people are like, oh, I wouldn't have said it that way. Oh, that might have been offensive. If it might have been offensive, it's offensive, right? So figuring out like, what do I need to do to help hold board members accountable? Chairs, that's a chair's responsibility. I believe think about your board this way. Instead of thinking about peers on your board, think about your role as a board chair, as a leader of leaders. If I'm a leader of leaders, my approach is very different, right? So figuring out how am I looking at that? Encourage evaluation. I put for everything, right? Evaluation will allow us to be there. Doesn't have to be tough, right? But it can be something. So a couple of them, CEO evaluation, which talked about once a month or so, or once a quarter or so, depending upon your meetings, right? A meeting evaluation form. Just asking people, how was the meeting? Was it the best use of my time? I have questions for the meeting evaluation in the trough that I'm giving you also. So it says, was this a use of a time? Did we get the information in enough time? It's not something that I got to report back out, but what it is it allows me to see, do people feel like this is the best use of their time? Do they feel like decisions are being made? Do we feel like we're spending enough time on stuff? So it allows us to do that also. I facilitate this assessment called the CCAT, the Core Capacity Assessment Tool. It's part of this group called the TCC group out of New York. And what does our organization assessment look like? How do we know? Right? Oftentimes, what is the culture of us? Looking at a culture survey. Some people look at culture assessments, a culture survey, and ways to figure that out. And then the DEI progress. People are saying, hey, this is going to be important to us. The first thing I ask them when people tell me that DEI is important to them, I ask them, how much money are you putting towards it? That's a measuring tool. If it's that important, how much money are you putting towards it to see where we're going? To educate people for it and to implement systems about that. Now, people are like, well, evaluation is important. And I just say, I can't think of anything that you all aren't going to do that doesn't need evaluation, how it can benefit it. My evaluation is going to help me understand how a chief executive is doing, where our fundraising is. I get to use those stories. I get to recruit board members, talking to them about that. So everything that I think you all are responsible for, including celebrating successes here, are important for evaluation. And then number 10 being the most important, which is M, right? That's your test to see if you're still staying awake or not. All right. So this is how we look at this information to see if we can figure that out. So I like strategy. Again, I think, hope is not a strategy. Oh, I hope it works out. Oh, I hope they come, right? Or I hope that check comes in now, right? Hope is not a strategy, right? So it says here, it describes how the ends, a strategy describing how the ends, the goals, will be achieved by the means, the resources. I love that. I know this is highlighted here, general plan to achieve one or more long-term overall goals, but understanding the goals and the resources and how they play together. Perfect. Kevin, thank you for responding to some of those for me. So this next one here, and if you have specific questions on what it means to take charge, right? Some people might need to, maybe it's not their role to take charge because that's what they're good at, right? So when is it time to take charge? When is it time to partner? And when is it time to stay out of the way, right? Take charge, partner. And for those of you who, we went through some of them and you'll see, I wish we had more time, right? But we don't. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about the next one, which is how do we partner and what does partner look like, right? This is it. How are we partnering? Well, you had me at hello, right? Is this truly a true partnership? And what may or may not that look like, right? So here are the things that we look at for that. If I'm a partner, I'm going to look at promoting board accomplishments and productivity, right? Sharing this partnership, right? Recruiting board members who build value, right? Not my friend Bob, not his friend John. I'm looking at, or Jane, how am I recruiting our board members to do that? How am I taking personal responsibility to facilitate the growth of individuals on my board and the full board, right? I often talk about a strategy of recruiting new board members and orient new board members. And how does that look in the same way? Is it always the same? And then how do I, get board members? We have a lot of stuff on that a lot of stuff on board source on that, so I won't go on that too much. And most of the people responded that they feel like their boards could use a lot of help in advocacy and coalition building. CCC group, they talk about what are some ways that people can do some of this work, particularly from the foundation side, and they came up with this document that just was released 2 days ago, right? Advocacy and coalition building, and what does that might that look like for the future? And what might that look like also? Okay, and I put down here, recognize the benefits of board diversity, all because you see what's above the iceberg. It doesn't describe who I am. You can see my race, you may be able to see my behavior, my gender, potentially even some of my actions. You may be able to think you know this, but the reality is the true me often at times is below the surface. So what are you all doing to help that? And then establish and reestablish term limits. The average across the country is 3 3-year terms, right? 3 3-year terms or 2 3-year terms. The most is going to be 2 3-year terms, 6 years, right? But those people who have been on there 15 years, 18 years, I say, you have to kind of look at that. And the board chair says to me, I don't see a problem with it. And my response is, of course you don't, right? That's why you're still there, right? Just try and figure out what is this, or how are we going to do that, and how are we going to move things forward on that, right? And then being strategic again, forecasting for the future, evaluating outcomes. How am I partnering with agencies? How am I partnering with groups? And how do I create a roadmap to achieve some of these goals, right? And then looking at advocacy as leaders who advocate, see past the current realities, find creative solutions, and serve our communities better. For those of you in the arts and culture community, you all know this, but when it's time for the budget, the arts and culture community, you can't even get into the council room, right? That's how many people are down there advocating, keeping resources where they need to go and keeping them in the budget. All right, any questions so far? I mean, I'm in New York, I'm running through this. So, but if anybody, any questions so far, I'm just trying to get the good information out there. And that's why I hate 1 hour webinars. But I'm going to give it to you. You'll have it. You can reach out to me, and we'll get that. And like I said, we're going to get this information to you as quickly as possible, sometime in the next 28 days. Okay. The last one is know when to take charge, when to partner, and when to stay out of the way. Okay. This one is going to be a little bit hard for people sometimes, and it's a little bit hard for me, right? I want to say, hey, how can I do that? So minding without meddling, right? You're keeping an eye on it. They often at times say that the board chair is going to meet with the CEO weekly or biweekly to know what's going on, co-creating. Yes, Susan, that can happen, right? Recreating the agenda together, finding out what's going on. So minding, being aware, not meddling, without meddling. When as soon as the pandemic hit, I talked to board chairs, I talked to CEOs. CEO says, every one of our board members are calling me and they're asking me, what can I do? And I'm saying, I am trying to figure this out myself, but I want them to help. I just don't know how, right? So figuring out what is that going to look like, how it's going to look like, and how can we help, right? I talked about getting off of the dance floor into the balcony, right? Looking in the mirror, what do I need to do as a board chair to lead this group? What do I need to know, right? So first of all here, this is, for many of you know this, the velodrome. It goes around most of the time, people see it in the Olympics, right? One person pops out, the next person takes the lead. But the reality is the question is, who's the leader in this, right? And at different points in time, they're all leaders. So how come our org charts and how come our board doesn't look more like this? There's sometimes I'm a leader and sometimes I'm a follower, right? I am the worst follower and I had to work on it, right? I'm going to tell you why. Because I'm leading a meeting and I'm talking and I expect people to listen to me, hear, active listen, try and figure out connections with their resources, figure out inside the boardroom, outside the board. I want them to do all of that stuff. But when somebody else starts talking, I'm looking at my cell phone, right? I'm doing all of this other stuff. So I'm not doing what I expect them to do, right? So being a leader and a follower, right? There's a philosophy out there called followership. How am I following? And what does it mean to have people follow you also, right? This one here is, the next one is about mastering conflict, right? People say, well, conflict, we want everybody to walk out happy. No, you don't want everybody to walk out happy, right? It's okay to have this really awful, mean-spirited attack. You don't want to go that far, but you don't want to go rainbows and unicorns, right? You want to kind of be somewhere in the middle. You want it to brew. You want to let the heat come up. Staying out of the way sometimes means allowing that to heat up, right? As opposed to, let's go on somewhere. Sometimes you allow it to heat up. It deserves it. We need it. And I want people to ask me the hard questions before I leave the boardroom. I don't want somebody to say, hey, how come we didn't think about that? Right? Figuring out what it is, letting it get a little bit heated there also, right? And number one here, when there's trust, team members are able to engage in unfiltered, constructive debate. Healthy conflict focuses on concepts and ideas to produce the best possible solution. In order for this to happen, you have to have trust. Trust is earned, and trust cannot be done in the boardroom alone. You have to create those times where outside forces and out time were together. I love the Library Foundation board. What they did was they wanted to try and make a position in the board called like a chief happiness person on the board. I said, I don't know, can you have a committee on happiness? Right. So what they did was they called it, they were responsible for, again, for raising money for the libraries, etc. But what they did, they called it a board roundabout. What they would do is in the morning, 9 a.m., they would open up somebody's trunk. They had coffee, muffins, bagels. And what they would do is they would tour 2 to 3 libraries together, right? Just allow them to see, but it's creative. It's something differently. And people are like, hey, I can spare the half an hour, 45 minutes, right? But somebody's like, I don't know why they don't come drink with us, right? We're having so many times. We were barely able to walk home. That's not fun for me, right? So, it may be fun for some, all right? Some people might be drunk right now. I don't know, right? So how are we going to do some of this work, right? So, and then lastly, as I move forward on some of this stuff, is that sustaining resources, right? What does it look like to sustain resources? I believe we need to have more broader definitions of resources. Is resources just money alone? No, it's about staff leadership. It's about a public image, right? Our committees, how are our committees working? Is the board chair leading and working on those committees? It doesn't mean you need to be in every committee, but it does mean you need to be the tie-in to many of the committees. I'll go back to recruitment for a second. People say that we recruit our new board members through our executive committee, or we recruit them through our governance committee. And I find those to be not the best way to go. And the reason I think that is because governance issues and executive committee issues will always win out. Right? Nominating committee, just like hiring, it's a year-round thing. I think that we need to make sure that we're doing that and we're talking about that also. Right? Yes, this is the 5 behaviors. We talked about that conflict in the 5 behaviors. The guy who wrote the book, Patrick Lencioni, wrote the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Well, they came out with an assessment in working with DIS. Now they call it the 5 behaviors of a well-functioning team. So, I'm certified in it. There's a few people that are certified in it, where you come out and it allows your teams to figure out, where do we score in trust? Where do we score on different levels? And then it gives you some ideas how to work on that. Establish policy, how these resources are acquired, and then determine how board members will participate. Somebody says, I don't feel comfortable asking for money. Or they say, I've asked all my friends for money. I have nobody else to ask for. You may or may not want that person asking money, right? I don't want somebody who's sweating hard in a meeting next to me asking for money, right? So what I do is I say, hey, maybe that's not for you. At the Library Foundation, what they did was they had Christmas one time a year. They would drop all these baskets off to every library for the staff, and that person was doing that and then spreading the word also, right? Maybe they're good at different ways to do that. And don't say we need young people on our board because we need them to run our social media, right? That's hard. We need to match people up with their gifts, need to match people up with their strengths, right? So again, a broader definition of what resources are, right? Resources are money, socially, marketing, analysis, services, and advocacy. And then I'm going to open it up for more questions in the time that we have. But I want to let you know this. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? There's a paradox here. They tell you be internal oriented, but also we want you to be external oriented, right? You have to be self-centered, but you also want to take the interest of others oh, you're supposed to be focused. Some people say flexible, incremental, bake through. You guys need to focus on the short term. Where's your strategic plan, right? You need to focus on the long term. It's a hard paradox here. So it's not easy, but I believe that the board's members, the board chairs, they're going to get us through this. They're going to take us to the next level, and governance is the key. So I'm going to stop there because I want to make sure that I cover a couple of more things, but I also want to make sure all the questions were answered. And you can unmute yourself right now if you have a question for me or for the group, and then maybe we can respond in the chat.
I know Carrie had a question earlier. Carrie, if you want to jump in, or I can find it in the chat real quick.
I think Carrie's question was about the volunteers. Is that accurate?
No, I asked about partnering with the director or the CEO, the board and the director partnering.
I like it. I think I missed my slide, Carrie. Thank you very much. So the board and the ED shared leadership. The board leads when it talks about policy, hiring, funding resources, financial due diligence, recruits. And for those of you who didn't know this, Carrie and I planned that out. Not really. So also the executive director, they're developing, proposing policy questions, right? Hires, supervisors, motivate staff, right? And then there's a shared leadership on this. I do strategic planning for, as to a lot of different groups. And if the board is not involved in that process, it definitely does not go anywhere, right? Fundraising plan evaluations, board meeting preparation sometimes is tied to that. There's a whole model and a whole books just on the board CEO partnership, because it is essential and it's extremely, extremely important. Thank you, Kay, for that. Other questions? Anyone else? Just on this stuff? I know I gave you a lot of information. If your head is hurting, I apologize, but that's my job. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
Lynn, Bob Lehman from Museum Council. What's your thoughts on, you talked about shared leadership, on the executive director helping in the recruiting process of getting new board members?
1000%. I think it's everybody, and everybody should be helping, identifying. It's going to be more for me about the process, right? So what I like to do is that somebody says, hey, this person is interested. We actually put together something. We already have a packet of information. Many of you, we're going to have this in there. I have a recruitment packet. It's like 15 pages. You give them, you write everything about your organization. You give that person it. They allows us to see it. Then we meet with them. If they still meet with us after all the requirements, they want to know how much time is required. What are the board limits? All of that stuff you provide them. And then I think that you match them up with what we refer to as a board buddy. And that board buddy has two responsibilities. One, meet with them before the first meeting. The second responsibility is be on the curb for their first meeting, right? You ever see a board member, they're sitting there, they don't know anybody, everybody's laughing, they're on their phone. Make sure you welcome them in like you welcome anybody into your family, right? That's the type of relationship you want to have with each other. So I think that anybody and everybody, my friends, I'm hoping that they are able to identify some people who could be beneficial to us. I don't want people saying, hey, I think Jim likes kids. Maybe he should be on your board. We don't even know if Jim likes kids the way we want Jim to like kids, right? So how do you want to refer Jim to me? But good, I hope that answers your questions. And I know I'm roughly just at almost at 10 now. But any other questions? And Stephen, I want you to kind of jump in a little bit, and we'll stay on a little bit more for those of you who can. But I do want to share about some resources that we have for you. And Stephen, if you don't mind, kind of like jumping in and talk about the board chair learning group, because it is a free opportunity and it allows people to go through this work. Thanks to the Avila Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Lynn. And welcome to all of you. I really do appreciate, Lynn, everything that you shared today. And since you and I are both New Yorkers, we will pound through all of the rest of it. But, any opportunity to get together with passionate leaders is one that I look forward to. I have the privilege of serving as the chair for NPI's advisory board. So this discussion means even more to me. And I just wanted to share a brief moment about how the board chairs learning group came about. This particular webinar is really an extension of some of the learning that NPI does throughout the year. And you heard a little bit about that from Lynn. But several years ago, Ellen Waddell and I had supported a panel about the board chair experience. And it was a panel that was at the Governance Symposium, also hosted by NPI. And the purpose of the panel was to simply explore some of the questions that we're all talking about today, the unique challenges of the board chair role. We had such a fun time, but more importantly, I think we all realized there was a need to have these types of discussions that were very specific to the uniqueness of the board chair role. I remember that the audience was very engaged, and we even had to wrap up before we could get to all the questions. So afterwards, Ellen and I walk over to Laura, who was the facilitator, and we asked her about similar resources, services, anything that we could find regarding board chair responsibilities and the oversight. And it was interesting because through our own experience as panelists, we realized how much we wanted the resource. And unfortunately, there wasn't any specific resource that Laura could point to. And you know that phrase, if you can see it, you can be it. Well, Laura kind of smiled in her Laura way. And I remember her saying to both of us, you guys need to create this resource to address this need. So long story short, we worked a lot with Laura and also with Lynn, and we were successful in launching the first cohort of the Board Chairs Learning Group. And, Lynn pointed out a lot of information for us to absorb today. Data, trends, needs, best practices, and listening and learning. But he also pointed out that one board is one board. And so one of the unique things about this learning group is that we actually take all of these things that we know to be best practices, and we try to apply them into practice and really have discussions, intimate discussions as a small team about the art of putting that into practice. So I would just encourage all of you to consider some of the resources available from NPI, and Lynn will talk a little bit more about that just to wrap this up, and just ask yourself, what is it that you're going to see that you want to make happen? And I just wanted to say thank you to Lynn, to the Nonprofit Institute, to Ellen Waddell and the Avila Fund, and also obviously to all of you, and just wishing you a happy holiday. So Lynn, I'll send it back to you.
Yep. No, good. Thank you all for coming. I know you could have been anywhere else this early in the morning. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for the comments. I'm glad you found this helpful. I want to make sure this is a good use of your time. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Governance Symposium. You're going to love it. Got some special stuff planned. Board Chair Learning Group, unfortunately, on the 27th, every year, it's on my birthday, so I can't even hang out. Right. So I was like, come on. Right. So Board Chair Learning Group, also very, very powerful. United Way board certification. Tell people about this information. We can lead the people through everything that they're going on right now with good governance principles. I believe that wholeheartedly. So thank you all very much. And I you will get those resources, and you'll get the presentation also. Thank you all very much, and have a good rest of your week. Happy holidays to you all. I look forward to seeing you.